Okay.
Can you hear me okay, by the
I
way?
can hear you great.
Okay.
And we're recording too. Everything's working out
Okay,
well.
cool.
Hey, I'm here with Alexi Pappas on this Sunday evening. There she is. Hello.
Hello.
Uh, and you're freshly back from South Korea, right? From
Yes.
the Olympics.
Yes,
Do you want to tell us what you were doing there? It's very exciting.
of course. So I was in South Korea at the Winter Olympics as an artist this time, not an athlete. And I was participating in the Olympic Artist in Residency program, which they started in Rio as an effort to bring back the arts to the Olympics, which used to be like a very important part of the Olympics, and now
Huh.
it is again. And so I went over with just my team, which was Jeremy, my partner, and he directed, filmed, did lighting, and did sound because we had such limited passes to such exceptional places. So we could go anywhere, but we only had passes for Jeremy, myself, and my co-star, who is Nick Kroll, who is Nick Kroll. And
Formerly Nick Kroll, yeah.
formerly Nick Kroll,
Yeah,
now Ezra the Dentist, which is
that's right.
his character's name. And we shot a film project there, which I'm very excited about.
So, how did they find you for this? I read the article in the Times when it was announced, and also you mentioned it on your Instagram. I didn't realize that was a thing in the past.
Yeah.
Is there like a stated intention of like what they're hoping to do with this program?
Yes. So in Rio it wasn't athletes who came at all, and I don't even think their intention was ever really to have athlete artists. I think they wanted like artists to come.
Right.
And the president of the IOC actually saw Tracktown, my movie, on
Hmm.
an airplane. And it was shortly after I met him in LA at a party to celebrate the 2028 LA Olympic bid.
Hmm.
And he called me the following week and was like, I really loved your movie. Have you any plans in February? And I was like, well, I was supposed to run like a half marathon, but what's up? And this was like too wonderful of an opportunity to not do it. And so we went over, and I feel like we really made the most of the opportunity because, you know, it could have been that we went over there with very little thought, and instead, you know, Jeremy made sure he had the best equipment to have feature film quality sound and you know, visuals. And we went over with a pretty detailed scriptment of like what we wanted to make, which means that we couldn't write the exact dialogue or anything because we wanted to really embrace what we found there, but we did
Hmm.
want to have like a clear outline of like what happens in this
Right.
film.
Right. Your structure. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like when you went there, did they sort of give you like a budget for this essentially, like and say, "Here's go make a film," or they kind of like? So you mentioned, I think on maybe Instagram today, I saw something you posted about like, it's going to be like 5 short films, but then maybe one larger film. So did they have any involvement in terms of like, this is what we're looking for from you, or is it kind of like, hey, go make a thing. You're a filmmaker, go.
They do. So they're very interested in having many. First of all, they wanted something pretty immediate after the games, and so as far as like a longer project, that they're fine with. But what they were really interested in our deliverable to them is these 5 short films, which they're gonna release it however they want. But I think they are looking for those more bite-sized,
Hmm.
like social media type content. And we were like, that's fine, but we also really want to capture as much as we can because it's such an opportunity that, you know,
Yeah.
no one's made a fictional film in the Village or in any of these backstagey places. So they do have like a deliverable from us. But they're also like, they understand that like the reason that they found us was because Tracktown had traditional distribution and made its way onto airlines. And so they're open-minded.
Right. It's awesome. So that actually is a really good segue into the other aspect of all this. I feel like so often, we're in this very cool age where like all these professional athletes are kind of posting and writing about their experiences. But they, just like many people, I think, do one thing and they're known for like one thing, right? So like you look at like Shalane or something like that, and she is like all in on this one thing. But you're fascinating to me because not only have you been a professional athlete for quite some time, But you also do this other thing that's also exceptionally difficult. I mean, I mentioned in our emails that I write for television, like professionally, and I've been doing it for about 9 years now. And you're able to do this very hard thing and this other hard thing. So how do you look at it in terms of like identifying as one thing or the other? Or like if you meet someone on an airplane, right, and they go, oh, so what do you do? How do you answer that question?
It depends on where I'm going.
Right. Good.
So I think the Olympic tattoo has been very helpful to me in many scenarios.
Yeah.
I've gotten out of speeding tickets.
Have you really? Yeah. That's right. You just flex a little. Yeah.
But for me, it's very important. It's always been important that the running and the film creative work like speak, they stand on their own two legs, each of them.
Mm-hmm.
And so as an athlete, I wanted to qualify and go to the Olympics, and I wanted to do damage at the Olympics, like completely independent of the creative work, even though in that same year we premiered Tracktown.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly with Tracktown and with, you know, I'm starting to work on a book project and things like that. I, of course, like they're enhanced by the athletic stuff, but I want the movies to stand up against any movie and you to not know that these are my Olympic teammates in Tracktown and so that's always been important to me, which is why this Olympic project is so interesting because, you know, in some ways it is like a mesh of those two worlds, but in other ways it's also just like a culmination of being at the highest level in both of those worlds, which has been very important to me. But I certainly think that my goals for Tokyo are like very ambitious and I want to try the marathon. And then my goals as a filmmaker and an actress long term are to, you know, abuse my body for the arts one day and not be competing at this level. And I think there'll be a time when my time goes more to the creative stuff. Whereas right now I feel very lucky to have Jeremy because like I nap every day. I don't pull all-nighters. He does. And so that's really how it works is I have a great team and I have my priorities set where the athletic stuff needs to come first for the most part. In Korea, the creative stuff definitely took a front seat. Like I was training as much as I could given the project we had.
Mm-hmm. And so what do your teammates and fellow athletes think of this when they meet you and kind of go, oh, this is like your own thing. You're doing that, you know? I mean, because is that common that the other athletes you interact with have these other side passions on the level that you're doing it?
I think that every runner is like, well, there's probably going to be a time when, well, one, we can't, as you know, run 24 hours a day. So what are you? When do you hang your shoes up? And some athletes, it can be to a detriment that you never end practice. Like you're always on your mind or you're always, you know, you don't end it. And so I think there's an element of health to that. And my teammates here in Mammoth are pretty like, I think they're pretty well-rounded. Like one of my teammates, Sarah Attar, who was the first female Olympian from Saudi Arabia, she has an interest in photography. So she'll go out and go retrace something we ran in photos. But I think, you know, there was a time when I was like a little bit self-conscious about it, certainly when I wasn't an Olympic athlete and I also wasn't like a really strong filmmaker yet. And that was a time when I really had to stay on my own team and really like just tuck my head down and show up every day to both of those things. So it wasn't like it always felt, I didn't always feel like 100% confident in those roles, but that's how everything is, right?
Right.
I'm sure that's, how do you feel as a writer? Like what was that trajectory like for you?
No, it's funny hearing you say that because it's almost the exact same thing for me, but just flipped. So like for me, like as you know, like you could actually conceivably write 24 hours a day if you were, you know, a maniac. I mean, if you were inclined to. And I feel like when I first moved to LA a decade ago, you know, I was 23 and like I had nothing going and I didn't have any friends in LA and I had like
from the East Coast, right?
Yeah, Jersey. Yeah. I went to school in Boston. So like lived on the marathon course in Boston for 2 years.
And where are you from in New Jersey?
Like very far north Jersey, kind of like Hudson River, like 15 miles from the city. We were like close enough to New York City to know that like we weren't from the city, you know, like there's a very strong like Jersey trash kind of like.
Jeremy's from New Jersey. I'm
Oh,
getting
really?
married in Jersey.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're getting married in Jersey?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, where are you getting married? Where is he from in Jersey?
He's from Bernardsville near Morristown.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So like kind of like centrally north-ish
Yeah.
Jersey, I guess. Yeah.
They
And
would sneak into the city for
yeah,
their.
yeah, exactly. I remember feeling so like tough and cool because after Thanksgiving every day, you know, every year, and growing up, we'd have the day off, you know, Friday off after Thanksgiving, and we would take the bus, the 167 from from our town into the Port Authority, and we'd go and like look at all the shops on Fifth Avenue, which we thought at the time was like, you know, as 14-year-olds, like the most cultured you could be by like looking at shop windows, you know, not like ever going down below like 42nd Street ever, you know.
Wow.
But anyway, yeah. But as far as like the writing stuff goes, all I did when I first moved here was this hustle, and I was like I didn't have agents or managers at the time, and all you're doing is like writing all the time, and then trying to get people to read your stuff all the time, and you really could spend like most of your day, you know, 12 hours a day, just fixating on this stuff. And then, of course, as you know, like with any obsession or any really difficult pursuit, whether it's running or filmmaking, the danger, I think, is in letting the outcomes define the experience versus the process, you know? But when you're younger and just starting out, it's so hard to go, well, the process is really all I care about, because you can't eat a process, you know, the process doesn't pay your rent. But I think at least having a sense of it at the time was very helpful. And now that I've been doing it and I'm, you know, somewhat established in the kind of area that I occupy in the industry, it's much easier for me, having had the mindset to put it into practice now, where it's like, okay, I write for, like, I'm writing on this show right now for Hulu, and writing my first like legitimate movie, not like the past attempts that I've made at it's so many pages, by the way, compared to TV. It's like 100 pages. That is way more pages to write.
And it's more like I've heard that they're different. Anyway, I mean,
no. They're hugely different. I mean, like,
but it's exciting.
It is exciting, but my rule is like, I mean, you know, if you're on deadline, you have to get it done. Fine, whatever. But when it's just me in my own little bubble, my rule is like, you know, an hour, maybe 2 hours of writing a day, and I put it away.
Wow.
And the rest of the day is, I mean, now if I'm at, you know, like right now I'm on a staff, so the day is much more like dictated by what, you know, the show needs that day. But when I'm in between shows, or like if I've sold a pilot and I'm working on that from home, it's just very much like you're saying.
You have to end it.
You have to put it away. Yeah, you can't just bring it home with you all the time. But for me, like, running is that other thing. Like, running is my, like, for you, filmmaking, like, that's my running. Where it's like a complete other passion that I have, and, you know.
But both are very, like, they're both things that you can work on and put time into and get a lot out of, which I love. But also, I think what's interesting about what you said about your earlier writing, like when you first moved to LA, I'm sure, you know, it felt like if you weren't putting it in all the time, you know, you weren't writing all the time, then you weren't really doing it. But I think now we probably both understand in both of these crafts of writing and running that giving 100% actually doesn't mean the same thing.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah. It's probably more, I think, for writing especially, and running as well, like, they're both such long-term goals. You know, if you're training for like a race and it's 6 months away or something or whatever. So like, it's really about like that consistent sustainability. The
lifestyle.
Yes. Right.
Which I feel like maybe you feel as a TV writer too, where that's a more like, it resembles more, or from what I understand from learning from Nick a little bit, it more resembles like a day job than the film process is so much more like there's phase 1, phase 2, you know, a little, so it's cool that those are similar in that way.
No, totally. Yeah. So speaking of Nick, how did he come into your film for the Olympic project?
Yeah. So Nick, I mean, it has been a long time Olympic fan, and he believed in us. He heard I think he heard the shout out that Paul Thomas Anderson gave to
Right.
Tracktown, which was like
Which is
really,
really cool.
really wonderful.
Yeah.
And he sat down with us, and that is something that I think anyone who senses potential like might do. And so we sat down with him. It was actually like a 24-hour thing where like he committed pretty much, I think it was like 12 hours later. I think for him, he really, more so than like a lot of actors, he has that background in writing and producing that, where I think he sees a bigger picture and he's like, hey, this has never happened before. This will maybe never happen again. I just think he like had a feeling, and that I am so grateful for, because his attitude and his gifts that he brought on set, because we heavily basically improvised the entire movie, were so huge. Like we surprised each other. And also honestly, just him showing up and being down for the uncertainty of it and the adventure of it. Like, it was cold. We were filming in places that nobody's filmed before, like at skeleton practice, and like needing to make sure we're not in the way of the coaches.
Right.
Like it's such a wild thing, but he really brought it, and he, I think, loved it. So I'm like grateful we came across him and we were connected with him through people who felt like this was a good fit.
Yeah. And so you guys live in, you train and live in Mammoth. So how does that work? Like, you guys come, and we'll talk about running next, I promise. Yeah. It's so interesting though. So like, you guys come down to LA once in a while for meetings, and when you have a thing you want to pitch, do you find like a benefit in some ways, like being like not so close to LA? We're like, all right, cool, we're going back to Mammoth now and have perspective. Come back when we need to do a thing.
Yeah, so we lived in Eugene for a really long time, and that was great because we filmed Tracktown there. I was training with a Nike team there, and it very much like prepared me for Rio. And then, when we needed to go to LA and we lived in Eugene, it was challenging because it was a flight away. Like, you had to fly and rent a car. Yeah. And so even though Eugene is like a bigger town and Mammoth is such a small little ski town, it feels like we're so much closer to LA, because if Jeremy, like for example, I think he's going to go work with our sound designer this week, and he can decide the night before and just be there. Like, it's not a difficult.
It's like 4 hours or whatever. Yeah.
It's so easy. And we have like, the flexibility for him to just go whenever he needs. I obviously have to check with coach. For me, I think with the running, it's just not worth it for me to do it at this level if I'm not in a place where I'm going to be the best athlete I can be. Like, I feel too strongly about like the goals that I have. It's just worth it to like do it. And right now the training in Mammoth is so good. Like, the team, the altitude, the mentorship that I have here, that I wouldn't train like this in LA. And the projects we're doing, thankfully, are mostly right now in our own hands. And so with that, we can live a little farther away. Of course, like, there's so much we're probably missing out on, but right now the trade-offs are still making sense to be here.
Well, and also I think it's so interesting because, like, for me to get a thing made, like, because I am in LA, my first and most immediate instinct is, I have, go to my managers, my agents, then sets a meet, and like it's very processy, and it's very like systemized, which is helpful in some ways, but it also means that like I take no for an answer much easier, because like I'll bring like last year I had a pilot at FX that we were able to sell. It was a super crazy idea, but it didn't go forward, beyond the pilot, and I was kind of like, okay, we'll get the next one. Whereas for you guys with Tracktown, like, it's really this lovely DIY film. It has that quality of like, I mean, to me, it felt a lot like a combination of like 70s movies, but also what's that?
But yeah, we learned a lot by making it all ourselves.
Right. Yeah. And so it has that quality of like, oh, let's just go make it versus, trying to go through the machine.
Exactly. And with that movie, like we raised all the money, we cast it, we did all the location scouting, we got my teammates to act in it because we wanted to make sure that they looked like real runners.
Mm-hmm.
We reached out to Rachel Dratch through we were in the same improv group years separated at Dartmouth. And
Hmm.
so it did have like very much that DIY quality. And I think we're moving what I love about filmmaking is that everybody has like this task that they are so good at and dedicated to, like the person who does produce or does sound, like that's their whole world.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, we wore many hats on Tracktown. And what I like about this progression is that we're slowly being able to wear a little bit like fewer hats, you know. Of course, like in Korea, Jeremy wore many hats, but I wore fewer. Like I helped write and I acted in the
Mm-hmm.
movie. And I get what you're saying though about that process, and it's really funny because we work with 3 Arts now, and I love working with a manager. It's very helpful, but there's also, you know, it's also so important to still for us to still know like we can be as scrappy as we would like to be, and to only see those people as like extra support, which they are.
Yes, exactly right. That's right. And I feel like it's yeah, that's totally true. I feel like with my managers, we get along so well and we have a really good working relationship. But I try to, as much as possible, like not know a lot of things, like as far as like how,
Yes, the
like
process.
what kinds of things are supposed to be pitched, or like what kinds of things like so and so might want to buy. Like it's only just like the weirdest things that I want to do, and then they help me figure out how we actually take it out. Versus like right now we're talking and it's the Oscars, right? Like, I don't know who's
Yeah,
who's won. I try to
I
really
know,
like
I know. We're
I,
bad. Are we bad?
no, I think we're great because I feel like my only like I have to live here because this is my job is, but I try to like pretend that I don't live in LA. So I don't
Oh,
want to like
really?
yeah, I don't want to know like I don't know like who sold what. I don't care. All I want to do is like make stuff on my own and
Yeah.
kind of bring
Well,
it to them.
and isn't that like such a thing where you make a choice, even as an athlete, you make a choice like as to where you put your energy, which is limited, and you
Hmm.
can put it into like taking in content, creating content, putting out you know, or like a combination. Um and I think that people are any number of that fall somewhere on that spectrum, you know,
Yeah,
and I
exactly.
just I just don't have time to, you know, it's like it's amazing how many movies I haven't seen and I should see more, but I get what you're saying where you're like doing. And wait, I want to know, where do you run in LA?
So I live actually, and this is the other thing too. I live where I live because of the running.
Where?
So I
I
live on the
mean,
west
don't tell me
side.
where you
No, no, yeah,
live.
my
Okay,
exact address. Yeah,
don't know where you're.
I live here. I live
Yeah.
in Brentwood, so it's like kind of
Hmm.
there's that main strip
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
with the trees like
Yes.
dividing the road. I'm right on that
Yes.
street. So like
Okay, yeah.
out my front door and to the beach is 3 miles. And so there's
Cool.
great, yeah, and like all the runners are here, and then the Santa Monica Mountains are like right that
Yeah.
direction, so I can go there with my
That
dog.
park, that cross
Yes.
country park. I like that park.
Well, there's that. That's probably Will Rogers. I think you're thinking of maybe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the polo fields and all that. So like we have like a huge mountain system right here.
Yeah.
So I used to live in West Hollywood a few years ago, but I was driving here to the west side in the morning just to go run, and then I
Oh,
would drive.
wow.
Yeah, it was silly. And then I
Wait, do
like
you run on the pavement?
I do both. Yeah, I do some trail stuff. But I really I love like just this. What my usual route is like my apartment to the ocean, and then like I'll go down like
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
beach path. So
Yeah.
like being from Jersey, sort of um, the beach meant summertime vacation. So now that I can
Mm-hmm.
like just run to the beach in the morning, I'm like that's where the country ends. Oh my god! And it's still
Yes,
like a decade
that is
later is so impressive to me.
funny.
But yeah, no, it's speaking of running, I'm sure everyone wants to hear all about my running with my modest running goals. But with you, so you mentioned Eugene, you were
Yeah.
there. One thing I've never really been clear on with the professional running
Hmm.
thing is like, how does that work? So you're on a
Yeah.
team, like, are they
Yep.
your sponsors? Like, how does all that
It
filter
depends.
in?
Yeah. So it's what's amazing about like I'm running today, and especially in the US, is that you don't have to have a shoe sponsor to run. Like obviously you can you can have no sponsor and run.
Mm-hmm.
But some of these groups are funded and sponsored by a shoe company, and then the coaches can recruit athletes and have their own resources. So a lot of groups function like that. Like a lot of people that you might think of, they are probably under some kind of like group contract, which like ties them to that company, but it ties them to that place and that coach and that team. And so in Eugene, that's one of the Nike teams is the Oregon Track Club Elite. And it functions similarly, where athletes might have their own like individual contracts with Nike, but not every, like they don't all look the same. And also the club has its own resources to do with it what it wants. And so so I think, and I can't speak to every shoe company, but I think like roughly they function like that, where a coach is tied to that company and that team, and anyone who they recruit will like become a part of that. And it's great, like being in Eugene. I think it's also like you pick a place that you are living, you want to feel like you're like really thriving wherever you're living, you know, whether it's like the trails, the people, and also like a place like Eugene is like, it's pretty affordable. So like you can be a very like well-supported athlete there.
Right. That sounds lovely.
Spiritual way. People love running there.
Yeah.
And so Eugene is great. My coach there, Ian, trained when he was an Olympian in Mammoth. And so that's why I started coming here for altitude trips. And it just happens to be that Eugene was more of a track oriented place, and Mammoth is like more this like marathon group. And so it made sense to keep spending time here, and then now spend, more my time here basically.
Right. So now you're with the Mammoth Track Club, right? And is that the casters run that?
Yeah.
And they coach it? So is that like an official like change? Like how does that actually even work?
Right. So the announcement, I guess I haven't made like a drastically bold announcement. I think people pretty much know that I'm here. I think people basically know. Most people would make like a really bold announcement. I'm
right.
I was like softly transitioning and am like loving it here. It's also like, I feel like I needed to like really absorb the change before I like said much about it. But I'm here, and I'm still like very tied to Tracktown in like my heart, like it's such a great place. It's just a place that I think athletes like come of age in. A lot of my peers did. And then like, I think there's a time when you like need to keep growing. And for me, training alongside women who pushed me was like a big thing I was wanting. And in Eugene, I trained with a lot of boys actually. And so now there's like women who can crush me, and that's very fun.
Yeah. Shalane's talked a lot about like the Bowerman Track Club and how like at first it was just her, and then and like all the guys, and now she's kind of made a choice to pull in. I didn't realize that was kind of a thing that was sort of like so male dominant.
Oh, like what is the difference between training with men or women? Or
no. I just mean that I didn't realize that the imbalances were so stark in some cases. Because everyone that I know who like runs, like every professional runner that I follow, is like a female runner. And then like, because I mean, like the women's side right now is so strong.
But things like it's strong, but like in the country, it would be easier for a woman to find a man to train with. If you think about it, like there aren't that many girls that can crush me anymore, like in the whole world. Right. Not to be like, but it's true. So to find women who can do that is harder than finding men who can do that, right?
That's really interesting. Yeah.
So like you could be training with I could train with more guys than I could girls in theory.
That makes a lot of sense. Right. I guess like even just thinking about like in terms of like the Olympic qualifying standard for the marathon, for instance, like I think for women it's like 2:48, I think.
I think so. I think you're right.
And then for the men it's 2:18, which is kind of insane when you consider that like the slowest guy who qualified out of, the 150 or whatever is faster than Shalane Flanagan.
Yes,
that's kind of mind blowing when you consider that. Like, were you there at the trials?
Yeah,
That was
I was.
amazing. And I don't know if you saw this one guy. He ran the whole thing in like not like jean shorts, but
Oh, I know that
like
guy.
like
Yeah,
old
yeah, yeah,
Pumas. Oh, you know
yeah.
of him or you know him personally?
I've met him, and he's like very close friends with a teammate of
Oh,
mine,
that's funny. Yeah.
legend of sorts, you know.
Yes. Yeah. He seemed like he kind of like doesn't I think it's like a CBD company or something like that. I think he was like
Yeah, he is
wearing the
some.
shirt of. I saw him in the
Yeah.
first lap, and I was like, "Wow, that guy's like who's that guy?" Like the old school Pumas or whatever. And then like the last lap, I saw him, and it was just like
Big
that
guy.
makes sense. Like just sort of like on the 90-degree pavement of downtown LA.
Oh, yeah.
By the way, how are you on times? 8:16. I want to be mindful of your Sunday evening.
I mean, let's wrap it up before 8:30. Does that work?
All
Is
right, perfect, great.
that
And
cool?
we can always do a round two at some point down the line. So continuing on the topic of running, what you mentioned like 2020 and Japan. What are you like training for right now? What are kind of the
Yeah.
near and far term goals for you with running?
So term, long term, short term goal, my goal for this year is to debut in the marathon, and that
Awesome,
will be sometime this year
very
to be
cool.
announced
Wow.
in the fall. And
Hmm.
I mean, I will run it in the fall. And so the whole, like right now, especially after Korea, it's just been like okay, let's like get back into the routine
Hmm.
and start to build. I have track that I'll run this summer in Europe. So I will run for Greece I think I'm going to Greece, London, and Berlin. And
Hmm.
so I'll jump on track and do the 10K. And that, like, I'll, I will do well in those races, but it will certainly be with eyes on the fall
Hmm.
marathon.
That's
And
very cool.
hopefully I will take to that event, and hopefully that'll be my event for 2020, and we will see.
Wow, crazy.
Hmm.
Man, so I imagine though, like it's a fascinating jump, like to think about with professionals, because you probably would run what in a given week, like 100 miles a week, 90, give or
Yep.
take, that
Hmm.
ballpark, which
Hmm.
would like that would actually kill me if I went out and did 100 miles in a week. You know, if I hit 50 in a week, I'm like thrilled. Um, so like I assume for you the jump is more like you could do a marathon tomorrow and probably like
Yeah, yeah,
smoke anyone that I know, but for you you're thinking of it, and I think this is like what always is important to clarify when we're talking about like the amateur perspective versus the professionals. Like you're talking about debuting at the marathon but like on the world class level essentially, right?
yeah. And
Yeah.
it is a shift. Like I think we can handle the volume certainly, but the focus changes. Like the long run is more important.
Mm-hmm.
The um the the mileage is important. And so, but certainly, like we don't go out there to like, and
Yeah.
in the 10K even, like I didn't run my first 10K until about a year before Rio, and so I was very late. I've been like a later bloomer in these longer distances, and that's okay with me because um I think some people do a lot too young, and uh I have a very I feel very ready and excited now for this jump. And I think also you might be able to relate because you're a marathoner, right?
Well, I mean, in the most amateur sense of the word, yes.
You're a
I'm
marathoner.
a marathoner,
So you're a
yes.
marathoner, right? So there's like a level of excitement of joining like a sport in the marathon that does reach that like wider audience. Or Tokyo, for example. Like the other thing about the Olympics is it's so hard to show up to an Olympics and do well. And any choices you make to make it better are helpful. And in Japan, they love the marathon. And that's the
Yeah.
other thing is like I'm so excited to be there doing the event that they love the most.
Right,
You
right,
know?
right. That's a great
Uh,
point. Yeah, there's a couple of pockets in the world, I guess, but I've always been so impressed by it. Just like I guess it seems to really tie into like broader philosophical beliefs in Japan of like hard work and dedication and like these things that the
yeah.
marathon really requires.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the marathon, like I lived on the course, the Boston Marathon course when I was in college. And
Yeah.
then but I didn't actually, I wasn't really a runner back then, which is insane to me now. Cause like when I'm back east, I'll go to Boston for
When
like a
did you
week.
find it? When did you find running and why?
So yeah, I mean, living on the course, my first, well, I guess I was a junior, my first year on the course, and I remember like going outside one day, my brownstone, and kind of seeing, you know, all of like these police barricades and all the Kenyans going by, because it's kind of a later start, and
Yeah.
and then I remember my senior year, I was like, I'm gonna run the marathon, like not knowing anything about it, and I had a friend drive me to Hopkinton, and this is like 2006, and I banded the race, and trained like probably my
Wow.
highest mileage week was probably like 8 miles for the marathon,
Wow.
and but it was like so impactful. I mean, we've all had the experience now of like
Yeah.
being just on the sidelines of race watching. Then when I came out here to LA in 2008, I came out here. My friend's girlfriend just had mentioned that her parents were in like this running club back in the 80s, and you should look into it. And I just joined this running club, and we started, it was sort of focused around the LA Marathon.
What was
But
your running club?
it's the LA Leggers, so we're doing this partially for them. And yeah, so they'll be seeing this in a few weeks.
Tell them
And
hello, leggers.
there you go. There you have it.
Wait, are they going to see us before they run the LA Marathon or after?
Probably after, at the rate that
Okay.
things
I hope it went
end
well.
up. Yeah, that's right. All the way from the future.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what is it about the marathon for you that drew you in?
Well, I think that I've always thrived on like people's belief in me. And so, even when I was a steeplechaser in college, I knew that I was like a long distance runner, and my coaches have always been like, you'll progress slowly into that and you will be a marathoner. And it's almost like I felt doomed and destined, where you're like, oh, like it's gonna happen. And
Yeah.
I think really meeting Tina Castor has been such a gift for me, because she, like, she's the best. And I mean, she's literally the best, but she's also like
Right.
best,
It's very, you can, yeah, it's very, you can use that figuratively and literally. She's actually the
yeah,
best, actually.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I've met a lot of great people. Like, it's a social sport. Like, running
Hmm.
is a social sport, and I've liked growing up with it. Like, I've liked now in my more, growing up life, to meet people. Like, even in LA, when I go there, some of my film mentors, like one of my biggest film mentors, Robert, he pulled me aside at Sundance, but he's like a big runner, and like I love that I get to like have friends like that. But also, if it's anything like the 10K felt like the greatest. You're pushing your mind and your body to its limit, and it's just as much mental as it is physical. And I like that, like, mental stuff. Like, I like being a smart athlete, because being smart really helps. Like, to know, in Rio, we all got lapped. Everybody but 3 people in that race, because it was a world record breaking race, got lapped. And some people freaked out. Like, people went backwards, went forwards. And my coach told me ahead of time, he's like, you're probably going to get lapped with a lot of people. And I was like, okay. He's like, you can still run like a national record, but you might get lapped. And I think with the marathon, if it's anything like that, there's like so much to mentally discover, like,
Yeah.
so many more miles of it.
That's right. It's like, well, really, it's kind of like writing a pilot versus a feature, like just
Oh,
massively longer.
you tell me after you.
Yeah,
It's
right.
funny, we're working on a TV show, so now we're gonna have to exchange like
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's one area where I have expertise in. I feel like with features, I'm like, so this is like 1,000 pages. So when do I wrap this? Like, actually, I was writing my run today. I cut it a little short, and so to make up for it, I wrote like 7 pages on the feature when I came back.
Oh, so you like add up your miles and your pages, and they
Kind
just have
of.
to like make sure that they add up.
Yeah, it's kind of
That's
like my second run was writing today.
nice.
But I think there is something really interesting too about the interplay between writing and running, because like writing is so inherently non-physical. Like right now, being on the show that I just started on Monday, like we're in a room like during the day, like sitting, and we'll like take walks around the lot once in a while or something, but it's like not a very physical job in any way. So there is a nice part of that. Like running is so simple. There's no, like, you just go out and do the run. You're in your body, like where you're supposed to be. Like living in your head is not where you're meant to live. It's too small. You know, you have a whole body for a reason.
And it gets simpler, I think, the more you're doing other stuff. Like the harder your logistical, you know, your whatever hurdles you're jumping through to get your film made, that makes running that much simpler. And like that, you know, it's just been running has been getting simpler and simpler for me. You know,
that is a really lovely side effect, I think, of having other, not interests, because that's kind of the wrong word, but like other like
goals, like other goals.
Yes,
that are
that's
different.
right.
You know, like, because in some creative work, it's like playing tennis where you're hitting it into another court and you don't have, or the other side, whatever, you know, and you don't have control over what's happening over there for a while. Whereas in running, it does really feel like you have a little, you know, it's simpler.
Yeah, no, and I think the more I can sort of like simplify writing as well, like I think of it this way, like with, you know, with say movies, for instance, right? Writing features. No one tells you how many you can write in a given year. If you want to write like 5 movies this year, like it's kind of not that, it's kind of easy in a way. It's like, if you have cool ideas,
you could shoot 5 movies if you're Joe Swanberg too.
Yeah, right. If you were, that's maybe an Olympian status of filmmaking, but like 5 pages, I always look at it this way, like 5 pages a day gets you so much. Like if you do that 5 days a week, that's like a feature in 18 days, 21 days, something like that. So every month you could have conceivably a movie script or like, you know, a pilot or something. So it's kind of, and same with running too, right? I mean, you're not running, you know, 100 miles a day. It's just over the course of a week, you kind of add it up and you get there over the course of many months.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you're getting at is really that whether you're a professional runner or writer or not, to call it practice or to have like a routine is so important. Like even, you know, anyone I talk to who's like, I'm trying to get into running or writing, I think the best thing is to say like, practice is at 7 a.m. tomorrow and lay out your clothes. And even if you're meeting yourself and nobody, to like put that time and to call it practice. I feel like labeling things like that. Yeah. Calling, even if your writing work isn't answering to no one, calling it your work. Like you're going to your office or you're using your special pencil or whatever. Maybe who's writing with a pencil anymore? But I think that labeling things like that and making them official as best you can is so helpful.
No, that's right. I think having routines around it, I think almost having the routines allows it to be kind of an autopilot situation. Like I don't have to worry about, you know, am I going to go for my run tomorrow or am I going to write tomorrow? Because it's just, what's the point otherwise? It's kind of like what the day is built around, those things. So I think the more you can kind of believe. Also, I feel like people often, like whether it's like new graduates or people who have come to LA recently, they'll often say to me like, oh, like, you know, I really want to write, you know, for whatever, TV or film. And I'll kind of ask them like, but why? Like, what is it about? Or I want to run a marathon. And I ask them like, well, why? And if there's a real strong why, that's the why and the how are probably everything versus like the what and the, you know, who, I think. Well, maybe who isn't. The analogy may have kind of fallen apart with who there, I think. I get it. You know what I mean? Though, like having a strong reason for it, that just fuels everything.
And to have a goal that you don't question during the process.
Yes,
much,
exactly. Which intrinsic.
That's easy for a race because you're like, okay, I'm committed to this until the race day. For writing, maybe you have to set your own deadline of like, I'm in it until whatever.
Yes, exactly. Exactly right. Well, I feel like we could talk for another like 3 hours here, but it's 8:30. It's Sunday night. You have a run tomorrow. I have work tomorrow. I know. I'll be in bed in 20 minutes. This is so great though. And so lovely. Yeah. And man, it's lovely to hear someone kind of crushing it in every pursuit. So keep going, man.
I'm doing my best. I think that's the best thing is like, it's not always, I'm not like peaking in both of these things all the time. No. That's the other thing is like, yeah, but I am doing my very best. And
that really, that to me is the success of it. Like you're just trying your best every day. And like some days are great. Some days are kind of so-so, but like
Yeah.
it's that consistent, like on the average, like it's a real pursuit and dedication, which I think is
Yeah.
anything. It's everything.
Thank you. It is so
Yeah.
nice to meet you as well, because I love meeting people who are like at the top of their game in the creative world and who
Top of their
love
game.
running. You are at the top of the game.
Well,
Like,
hey,
you are.
when you're in LA, we'll meet up and we'll talk writing and running, and maybe on the run even.
Yes,
That'd be
let's
great.
run. I know where you live.
That's right.
Roughly.
Yeah, exactly. All right, Alexi, have a good
Amazing.
evening.
Okay, and congrats to all of you athletes who ran the LA Marathon. I may or may not have been there. This is now it's getting like very meta.
Yeah.
Maybe I will have watched it. Maybe I will not have been there.
This is now the adaptation of Skype interviews.
And everyone just have fun with everything.
That's the whole point. Exactly.
Okay.
All right. Take care. Good night.
Talk soon. Thanks.
Absolutely. Bye.